Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, can you please tell me where and what time you're watching? Thanks. I've spent most of my life working as a security guard. It's not the most glamorous job, but it gets the bills paid. Gas stations, convenience stores, small shops, mostly places where you just sit around, keeping an eye on things. When I came across an ad for a night shift at the local mall, I thought I'd finally found something better. The pay was good, better than anything I'd seen in years, and the hours weren't bad either, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was just one building, and I figured it would be quiet and straightforward. How hard could it be? I imagined myself sitting in the security office watching cameras and strolling through the vast, empty halls in the stillness of night. I applied immediately and was surprised to get a call the very next day. The manager, Mr. Hensley, asked if I could come in for an interview that afternoon. It seemed a bit rushed, but I didn't question it. I needed the job, and the mall was only a short drive away. On my way there, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were moving a little too quickly. Was the mall that desperate for a night guard? The interview itself was brief, almost hurried. Mr. Hensley asked about my experience, but it felt like he wasn't paying much attention. He ran through the basics. Check the cameras every 15 minutes, do hourly patrols, nothing unusual. Then at the end he asked, "Can you start tonight?" I was caught off guard. Most places want time for paperwork or background checks, but I wasn't about to argue. "Sure," I said, trying not to sound overly eager. He looked relieved. "Great, we're understaffed," he admitted, rubbing his temples like it had been a long day. "The last few guards didn't last. I hope you'll be different." His words gave me pause. What did he mean by that? Before I could ask, he handed me the key to the security office and said, "Be here at 11 p.m. sharp." I shook his hand, left the office, and went home to get some rest before my shift. When I arrived at the mall that night, it was dark and deserted. The parking lot, which was bustling during the day, was almost empty. A few scattered vehicles sat under the dim glow of the parking lights, making the space feel vast and eerily silent. The mall looked like a sleeping giant. For a moment, I considered turning around and going home. Something felt off. I brushed it off as first-day nerves and walked toward the employee entrance. Mr. Hensley met me at the door without much fanfare. He led me through the maze of corridors to the security office, going over the basic protocols again as we walked. The office was small, cramped, and filled with monitors showing grainy footage from cameras placed throughout the building. "Check the cameras every 15 to 30 minutes, he reminded me. "Do your rounds, make sure nothing's out of place." Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "And keep an eye on the escalators in the play area. Things happen there sometimes." That last comment made me pause. "Things happen?" He waved dismissively. "Kids, mostly. Sneaking in or messing around after hours. You'll see." His tone made my skin crawl, but I nodded. He handed me a printed sheet of standard instructions, shook my hand and said, "Good luck, I'll see you in the morning." Once he left, I was alone. The silence of the empty mall wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. I sat down in front of the monitors, flipping through the camera feeds. The escalators were motionless, the stores dark and empty. For a moment, I relaxed. It was just a mall, a big, quiet building. Nothing creepy about that. A few minutes later, I felt a presence behind me. Startled, I jumped, my heart pounding. Standing beside me was a janitor. He grinned, clearly amused by my reaction. "Didn't mean to scare you, buddy," he said, his tone light. "You must be the new guy." I let out a nervous laugh, trying to calm my nerves. "Yeah, that's me. I didn't realize there was a janitor here at night." He shrugged. "They always keep one of us around, cleaning up, making sure things are ready for the next day." His tone shifted, becoming more serious. "Just make sure you follow the rules." I blinked. "The rules? You mean the instructions?" He handed me a crumpled piece of paper, his expression suddenly serious in a way that made me uncomfortable. "These," he said, aren't just from the manager. These are the rules you'll need to follow if you want to make it through the night. I unfolded the paper, half expecting some kind of joke. Instead, I found a list of rules that were anything but funny. Rules to keep you safe at night 1. Check the security cameras every 15 to 30 minutes, but don't stare at the footage for too long. 2. Never look directly at the mannequins after midnight. If the mannequins change positions, leave the area immediately. I stared at the list, a knot forming in my stomach. "You're serious?" I asked. The janitor's grin was gone. His face was grim. "I'm warning you, follow the rules or you'll end up like the last guy." I tried to laugh it off. "You mean the last guard?" He nodded, his eyes cold. "He quit after one night." "Okay." I stuffed the paper into my pocket without reading the rest of the rules, chuckling nervously. "Well, I'm going to make my first round." The janitor stepped aside, giving me a long, unreadable look. "Take care," he said. I nodded and walked out of the office, but his words clung to me. Something about his tone, his look, felt off, like he was genuinely scared. But I wasn't about to let a weird list of rules rattle me. It was just past midnight when I began my first patrol. The mall at night was far eerier than I'd expected. As I walked down one of the main hallways, I tried to focus on the task at hand. The mall wasn't enormous, but it was big enough to require regular patrols. There were plenty of stores to check, some abandoned, others locked tight with window displays sitting dark and lifeless behind the glass. Near the food court stood a children's play area, its bright plastic toys looking strangely sinister under the dim emergency lights. Farther down I spotted the escalators, still and silent, their frozen steps ascending into darkness like relics from a busier time. I was beginning to settle into the quiet when something caught my attention. One of the clothing store doors was wide open. I stopped, shining my flashlight into the store's shadowy interior. At first, everything seemed normal, but as the beam swept across the racks of clothes, I caught movement in the corner of my eye, a slight, almost imperceptible shift. I turned my head quickly, but there was nothing there. Just a few mannequins near the back, as still as ever. I let out a nervous sigh, shaking my head. "It's nothing," I muttered, trying to convince myself. But then I heard it, the faint sound of fabric rustling. I whipped my flashlight back toward the mannequins. One of them had moved. It was now standing slightly closer, its position subtly different from before. My pulse quickened. "Hey," I called, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Mr. Janitor?" My voice echoed in the empty mall. No response. Just the soft, unsettling shuffle of fabric again. I turned back toward the mannequins, scanning them with my flashlight. This time, one of them had shifted again, its head now tilted slightly, facing the exit. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. This couldn't be happening. There was no one else here. No way this was a prank. I backed out of the store, my legs stiff with fear. As I turned to leave, I heard it. Footsteps. But they weren't normal footsteps. They were heavy, dragging sounds, like wood or plastic scraping against the tiled floor. I spun around and my heart nearly stopped. The mannequin, the same one from the store, was standing in the middle of the hallway. Its lifeless blank face was turned toward me. The hairs on my neck stood up as I watched it. Slowly, stiffly, it began to move toward me, its joints creaking and groaning with every step. Its movements were jerky, robotic, like a puppet on invisible strings. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I bolted down the hallway, my footsteps echoing wildly in the cavernous mall. I didn't care how ridiculous I looked. I just needed to... I bolted down the hallway, turning sharply into the corridor that led to the restrooms. The heavy, scraping footsteps behind me had stopped, but I didn't dare look back. I stumbled into the restroom, gripping the edge of the sink and splashing cold water on my face, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. As I looked up into the mirror, something caught my eye. A woman. She was standing near the stalls, her back to me, dressed in the plain uniform of a cleaning lady. I blinked, and she was gone. My heart skipped a beat. I spun around, scanning the restroom, but there was no one there. It was empty. I collapsed to my knees, shaking with exhaustion and fear. What was happening? I tried to piece everything together, but nothing made sense. Then I remembered the list. With trembling hands, I pulled the crumpled paper from my pocket and unfolded it. The next set of rules stared back at me, written in stark black ink. Rule 3. If a mannequin looks like it's following you, don't look back. Mannequins sometimes follow guards, but if you ignore them, they'll stop. If you look, they'll know you're aware, and they'll get closer. My stomach dropped. I had looked. Rule 4. Avoid looking into the mirrors of the restroom. Too late for that. A wave of nausea washed over me as I realized I had already broken 2 of the rules. Whatever was happening, I was making it worse. Rule 5. If you hear someone talking inside an abandoned store, do not listen. I swallowed hard. I hadn't heard anything yet, but just knowing the rule existed made me uneasy. Rule 6. If you hear a child laughing from the play area, leave immediately. Rule 7. If you check the time and it's earlier than the last time you looked, return to the security office immediately. Instinctively, I glanced at my watch. The time read 11:30 p.m. My blood ran cold. That couldn't be right. I had started my patrol well past midnight. It had been much later than that. This was impossible. I didn't need to be told twice. I rushed out of the restroom, my heart hammering in my chest as I made my way back to the security office. The air felt heavier now, more oppressive, and the overhead lights flickered faintly. The mall, which I'd thought would be a quiet, easy place to work, now felt alive, like it was watching me, waiting. I burst into the office and slammed the door shut behind me. My breathing was shallow, my nerves frayed. I glanced at my watch again. It was nearly 1 a.m. That seemed right. But what had happened earlier? Why had the time shifted like that? I sank into the chair, trying to steady my trembling hands. I had to keep my head on straight. I couldn't let this place break me. Pulling out the list again, I scanned the remaining rules. Rule 8. Lock the security office door between 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. Do not open it for anyone, no matter who they claim to be. Check the cameras to confirm. Rule 9. If you hear someone crying in a dressing room, do not open the door. Rule 10. If you hear an escalator running, do not investigate. Watch the area on the cameras. Rule 11. Under no circumstances should you leave before your shift ends. If you do, you risk something following you outside. I let out a nervous laugh, though there was no humor in it. What kind of job had I taken? Who had written these rules? None of this made any sense. But as I sat there, the weight of the night's events pressed down on me. The mannequin, the shifting time, the figure in the mirror. This wasn't normal. Whatever was happening, I had to survive until morning. It was past 1 a.m., and I knew it was time for another patrol. As much as I wanted to stay locked in the office, I also knew I had to follow the protocols. The cameras showed nothing unusual, so I gathered my courage and stepped back into the mall. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. I moved cautiously down the main hallway, hyper-aware of every shadow and flickering light. That's when I heard it. A faint, muffled mumbling coming from one of the abandoned stores. My blood ran cold as I remembered Rule 5. I stopped in my tracks, my pulse racing. The sound was barely audible, a quiet, almost conversational murmur coming from the darkened store. It shouldn't have been possible. It was supposed to be empty. Inside, I forced myself to move, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. Rule 5 echoed in my mind. If you hear someone talking inside an abandoned store, do not listen. I tried to block out the sound, telling myself it was just my imagination. But the soft, incomprehensible murmurs persisted, growing louder as I neared the store. I glanced at the glass storefront. The windows were covered with paper blocking any view of the inside. My breath hitched, and I quickened my pace, refusing to look in its direction. I didn't want to know what was behind those papers, or what was causing that sound. The voice was rising now, clearer but still distorted, like someone speaking underwater. I had to get away. I hurried past the store, refusing to glance back. The voice began to fade, and I felt the tension in my chest ease slightly. But as I turned the corner into the next corridor, I heard it again. Footsteps, not normal footsteps. My stomach twisted, dread pooling inside me. I knew what it was before I even turned. The mannequin. Every instinct screamed at me not to look back. Rule 3. If a mannequin looks like it's following you, don't look back. If you ignore them, they'll stop. If you look, they'll know you're aware, and they'll get closer. I picked up my pace, keeping my eyes forward. The sound of its movements grew louder, each step heavier and more deliberate. My heart pounded in my ears as I fought the urge to turn around. Just keep walking. The sound of its movements slowly faded until I could no longer hear them. I exhaled shakily, realizing I'd been holding my breath. My hands trembled, but at least I'd followed the rule. For now, whatever was following me had stopped. Then, I heard something else. The distant hum of machinery. An escalator running. I froze, the blood draining from my face. Rule 10. If you hear an escalator running, do not investigate. Watch the area on the security cameras. Without hesitation, I turned and bolted for the security office. I wasn't going to risk breaking another rule, not after everything I'd been through. My mind raced as I sprinted down the hallway, past the now quiet abandoned store, toward the safety of the office. The mechanical whir of the escalator grew louder, but I didn't stop. I burst into the security office, slammed the door shut, and locked it. My breaths came in short, ragged gasps. I turned to the monitors, flipping through the camera feeds until I found the escalator. There it was. A figure. It wasn't a person. Not exactly. It was tall, unnaturally so, with spindly limbs and a face obscured by shadows. The figure stood on the escalator, its body stiff and jerky, moving in unnatural motions as the steps carried it upward. I stared at the screen, frozen. My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing. The figure's head turned slowly, almost deliberately, as if sensing something. Then, impossibly, it looked straight at the camera, straight at me. The monitor flickered violently, static filling the screen. A loud, grating buzz filled the room, making me recoil. I snapped my gaze away, remembering Rule 1. Don't stare at the footage for too long. The buzzing stopped. When I glanced back at the monitor, the escalator was empty. The figure was gone. I slumped back in my chair, my body trembling uncontrollably. I couldn't do this anymore. My nerves were shot. The rules, those damned rules, felt like a cruel game designed to break me. I just had to make it through the night. Just a few more hours, I told myself. The next hours passed in tense silence. I stayed locked in the office, too shaken to do another patrol. My eyes stayed glued to the monitors, scanning the empty hallways, the motionless stores, the escalator that now stood still. Everything seemed calm, yet the air in the office felt suffocating, heavy with an unshakable dread. Then I heard it, a knock at the door. The sound made me jump, my heart leaping into my throat. My eyes darted toward the security monitors, to know what he meant. "Wait," I called after him, my voice echoing in the empty corridor. He stopped but didn't turn around. For a moment he stood perfectly still, his silhouette bathed in the flickering light. Then, without facing me, he spoke. "You've got until dawn to make it out of here. Stick to the rules, and maybe, just maybe, you'll see the sunrise." My stomach churned. His tone wasn't reassuring. It was a warning. "What happens at dawn?" I demanded. my voice rising despite the knot of fear tightening in my chest. The janitor chuckled again, low and menacing. "Dawn, that's when the mall decides who stays and who goes." Before I could press him further, he stepped forward into the shadows and disappeared as if the darkness had swallowed him whole. I stood frozen in place, his words reverberating in my mind. Who stays and who goes? What did that mean? I turned back toward the security office, every nerve in my body screaming for the relative safety of the locked door. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The silence in the mall was heavier now, almost suffocating. The flickering lights cast warped shadows that seemed to reach out toward me as I passed. Back in the security office, I slammed the door shut and locked it again. My hands were trembling as I sat down at the desk, staring at the monitors. The cameras showed nothing unusual, but I didn't trust them anymore. Not after everything I'd seen. I glanced at the clock. 5 a.m., one more hour, just 60 minutes. I pulled out the list of rules again, reading through them for what felt like the 100th time. My eyes scanned the paper, searching for some hidden clue, something I might have missed. But there was nothing new, just the same cryptic instructions that had been my lifeline all night. Then I noticed something. A faint smudge near the bottom of the page, as if someone had tried to erase something and hadn't quite succeeded. I held the paper up to the light, squinting at the faint outline of words beneath the smudge. Rule 12. It was barely legible, but as I strained to read it, the words became clearer. Rule 12. When dawn arrives, do not trust the light. A chill ran down my spine. The janitor's words echoed in my mind. That's when the mall decides who stays and who goes. What did it mean? What was going to happen at dawn? My mind raced with questions, but I knew I wouldn't get any answers sitting here. I checked the clock again. 5:15 a.m. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. I could feel the weight of the night pressing down on me, the oppressive silence of the mall wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. And then, at exactly 5:59 a.m., the monitors flickered. Every camera feed cut to static for a moment before returning, but the images were wrong. The hallways were filled with mannequins, far more than I'd ever seen before, standing in unnatural poses. Their blank faces seemed to turn toward the cameras as if they knew I was watching. The lights in the mall began to flicker violently, and a low, rumbling hum filled the air. I could feel it vibrating through the walls, through my chest. The clock struck 6 a.m. and the monitors went black. For a moment, there was nothing but darkness and silence. Then the door to the security office creaked, as if someone or something was trying to open it. I clutched the list of rules tightly in my shaking hands, bracing myself for whatever was coming next. And as the first rays of dawn pierced through the windows of the mall, I realized with chilling clarity what "don't trust the light" truly meant. Way out. The rules had saved me so far, but I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep up. My hands trembled as I checked the monitors again, scanning each feed for any sign of the woman, or whatever that thing had been. The corridors were empty, the dressing room still and silent. Nothing seemed out of place, but that only made it worse. The quiet felt oppressive, like the mall itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I leaned back in my chair, trying to steady my breathing, but the sense of unease wouldn't leave me. I glanced at the clock. 5:45 a.m. Just 15 more minutes until my shift ended, but the weight of every second felt like a lifetime. I reached for the list of rules again, my fingers brushing the crumpled paper like it was a lifeline. I needed to focus, to keep my head straight, but as I unfolded it, something caught my eye, something new. There, scrawled at the bottom of the page in jagged handwriting that hadn't been there before, was an addition to the rules. Rule 13. If the crying stops but the figure remains, do not leave the office until sunrise. My stomach dropped. How had it gotten there? Who, or what, had written it? My pulse quickened as I reread the words, their meaning sinking in. I checked the monitors again, my eyes darting between the feeds. At first, everything seemed normal. The hallways were empty, the stores dark and lifeless. But then, on one of the cameras, I saw her. The woman was back. She stood in the middle of the hallway outside the security office, her hair still hanging over her face, her body unnaturally still. This time she wasn't crying. She was silent, eerily so, and she was facing the door. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. She didn't move, didn't make a sound, but the air in the room seemed to grow colder. The lights flickered again, and I felt the oppressive weight of her presence pressing down on me. The rule was clear: do not leave the office until sunrise. I sat there, paralyzed, watching the figure on the screen. She didn't move, didn't waver, but her presence was suffocating. I checked the clock again. 5:55 a.m., 5 minutes. I gripped the edges of the desk, my knuckles turning white. Every instinct screamed at me to do something, to run, to hide. But I knew better. I couldn't break another rule. Not now. The minutes dragged on, each second an eternity. The woman didn't move, didn't disappear. She just stood there, her head tilted slightly as if listening for something. The clock struck 6 a.m., and the first rays of dawn began to filter through the mall's windows. The light seemed to chase away the shadows, illuminating the empty hallways. I turned back to the monitor, my heart pounding. The woman was gone. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The memory of Rule 12 resurfaced: do not trust the light. The sunlight spilling into the mall felt warm, almost inviting, but I couldn't shake the nagging doubt. Was it really over? Or was this another trap? I stood, hesitating for a moment, before unlocking the office door. The hallway outside was empty, bathed in the golden glow of morning. I stepped out cautiously, my senses on high alert. The mall was quiet, almost peaceful, but the unease lingered. I made my way toward the exit, each step feeling heavier than the last. As I reached the doors and stepped into the morning light, a strange sensation washed over me. The warmth of the sun felt off, like it wasn't real. I turned back to glance at the mall one last time, and for a split second, I thought I saw her reflection in the glass, watching me with that same unnatural stillness. I didn't wait to find out. I walked away, vowing never to return. But as I left, the janitor's words echoed in my mind. You'll figure it out, or maybe you won't. Either way, there's no escaping it. The faint hope that my shift would end soon was my only solace as I glanced at the monitors. My heart sank. The woman, the same pale figure with limp hair obscuring her face, was moving again. This time she wasn't just wandering the halls. She was heading straight for the security office. My blood froze as I watched her glide closer, her jerky, unnatural movements making my skin crawl. She didn't walk like a normal person. Her feet barely touched the ground as she hovered forward. The sobbing was gone, replaced by an oppressive weight that distorted the very air around her, bending reality itself. Desperation set in as I flipped through the camera feeds, tracking her approach. She was nearing, her face hidden by that curtain of hair, her arms hanging lifelessly. My breath quickened, and panic clawed at my throat. Clutching the list of rules with trembling hands, I repeated the mantra over and over. Don't open the door, don't open the door. On the monitor, she stopped right outside the security office. I could see her clearly now, standing still like a statue. For a fleeting moment, I dared to hope she might leave, that she'd vanish like a nightmare at dawn. Then, the knocking began. It was soft at first, barely audible, but grew louder and more forceful, until it felt like the entire door was about to give way. My pulse roared in my ears as I stared, frozen in terror. She was just inches away, and her presence pressed down on me like a suffocating weight. I checked the monitor again, praying she'd disappeared, but she hadn't. She stood rigid and motionless, even as the knocking escalated into violent pounding. The doorframe rattled under the assault, and I clamped my hands over my ears, squeezing my eyes shut in a futile attempt to block her out. This couldn't be real. It had to be a hallucination, but the knocking only intensified, each blow more insistent than the last. Then I heard it, a voice. "Hey, open up, it's the manager." I froze. It was Mr. Hensley's voice, familiar but somehow off. I glanced at the clock. 6:01 a.m. Relief washed over me, but doubt crept in just as quickly. Was it really him, or was this another trick? My eyes darted to the monitor. The woman was gone. No pale figure, no shadow, no lingering presence. "Everything okay in there?" Mr. Hensley called again, his tone concerned. "Your shift's over." My hand hovered over the door handle, hesitant. The clock showed past 6 a.m., and nothing had attacked me. I should have felt safe, but the night's horrors had shattered my trust. One last glance at the monitor confirmed it. Mr. Hensley stood outside, looking exactly as he always did. No distortion, no eerie signs. With a trembling hand, I unlocked the door. Mr. Hensley entered, his expression softening as he took in my shaken demeanor. "Rough night, huh?" he asked gently. I nodded, still reeling. "Yeah, you could say that." He frowned at my haunted look. "You all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." I laughed bitterly. Something like that. I didn't tell him about the mannequin or the woman. It all seemed too surreal. I was just relieved it was over. But before I could leave, one question burned in my mind. "What about the janitor?" I blurted. "The one who works nights?" He gave me a list of rules to follow. Mr. Hensley's puzzled expression sent a chill through me. "What janitor?" he asked. "No one works nights here except you." The ground seemed to shift beneath me. "But there was someone," I stammered. "He was here all night." Mr. Hensley shook his head, his tone serious. "There's no night janitor." My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of an impossible puzzle. If there was no janitor, then who or what had warned me? And those rules, where had they come from? I didn't ask any more questions. Silently, I handed Mr. Hensley my keys, quit on the spot, and walked out of the mall without a backward glance. As I drove away, the weight of the night lingered, an unshakable reminder that some places are best left alone. That mall? It was one of them.